Hey, you're watching Rapid MMA. I'm Tyler. This is the breakdown for Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 2 for UFC 202. There's a common misconception among fans that Conor dominated the first round when they squared off the first time. Conor did land the left hand with power, and he landed it quite frequently, but it's overlooked that Nate countered this with his lead right hand. This also allowed Nate to roll with the punch or block it on the shoulder. Conor also missed with the left hand quite often when he was swinging at the air. Nate also was able to tie up with Conor and press him against the fence when things seemed a little dicey, and to Conor's credit, he did reverse position on the ground and end up on top. He did more damage, and he won the first round. Still, it was more closely contested than most people believe. The second round was more the same, Conor throwing the left as frequently as possible while mixing in the uppercut, hitting the air and getting countered with Nate's right. Conor's overreaching left finally began to wear on his cardio, and visible exhaustion began to set in about the 3-minute mark of round 2. Nate saw this immediately, and he began to unleash the beautiful 1-2 that himself and his brother Nick have so much success with. And at this point, Nate has taken all of Conor's best shots, but Conor, he wasn't able to take Nate's. The 1-2 begins to land more frequently and more flush each time as Conor's movement and footwork have nearly become non-existent. Conor still tries to press forward and unleash combinations, but it was a failed effort. Taking Diaz out is a daunting task for any fighter, and with 1.5 rounds in the books, Conor's power shots, they weren't paying off. Nate lands flush with the 1-2, and Conor shoots in. At this point, we run into another misconception: Conor's grappling. It's very much underrated. I think he is a good grappler, but when he's exhausted and he's hurt, logic, that goes out the window, and he was looking for a way out. Conor knows what he needed to do to defend himself on the ground, but I don't think he had the cardio to keep Diaz off of him, and it was clear that Conor was fatigued and rocked while Nate secured the position and he sunk in the choke. Conor's conditioning and game plan, it will be different this time around. Look for him to set up his shots, use more in and out movement to avoid the counters, and not rely on power alone to defeat Nate Diaz. I expect Conor to try and draw Nate forward and counter a little bit more in this fight. Although Conor is good at pressuring his opponents, he's also a very effective counter striker. That may be the key to chipping away and defeating Nate. Attacking the lead leg will also be a priority since Nate leans heavy on it to get full range and extension and power on his punches. RDA exploited this in their bout. It won't take Nate out, but it's a way to hinder his movement and allow Conor to land his shots with more success. I'm pretty confident Conor can go 5 rounds, and I do think Conor stands a good chance at winning. Nate has been a decision 11 times, 8 of those are losses. If Conor can pick Nate apart, work the lead leg, and keep it basic, he could take a decision victory. The blueprint has been laid out by RDA on how to defeat Nate Diaz. Conor is also still very powerful, and just because Nate was able to take Conor's best shots, the fight only lasted a round and a half. If Conor can accumulate damage over the course of a few rounds, he can win by KO or a TKO. There's a reason why his coach John Kavanagh is calling for a 4th round stoppage. They have a plan, and it's probably a much more logical one than what they were doing in their first go. So if you're leaning Conor, I see him winning by knockout TKO somewhere after the 2nd round. I can also see him winning a decision despite what most people say. Now for Nate didn't come in fight shape in the first fight. He didn't do any sparring, and he didn't have any time to come up with a plan to defeat Conor. He had to do it in real time, and that was the result of the first round. He knew Conor would step in with the left hand, so Nate swayed at the hips, used his length to counter with his lead hand, and used footwork. A complete counter-striking game plan, allowing Conor to lead the dance, miss shots, and get picked apart deceptively. Now, unquestionably, Nate had trouble getting his rhythm and timing, which is both due in part to the short notice, but also Conor's speed and precision. Nate has had issues in the past with slipping the left hand of southpaw opponents, and it was apparent in the fight with Conor. In this rematch, I still think Nate will eat plenty of left hands because Conor's simply a fast fighter. However, despite Nate eating some big blows from Conor, he still lasted. The huge key difference is Conor's chin and how that will hold up this time around. The longer this fight goes, the larger chance that Nate lands the 1-2 or the jab cross right hook. I'm not so sure Conor can take a shot from Nate. Although Conor could probably hold his own defending submissions and grappling with Nate, I still believe over the course of 5 rounds, Diaz will be the more seasoned vet as far as being the more dominant grappler. And in the first fight, Nate was able to push Conor up against the fence quite easily, and although the exchanges as far as striking was pretty even, it seemed that there was a clear strength differential there. No matter how good of shape Conor is in, Nate will still outwork him. Nate can throw combinations all day long, and I see that being the difference. High output, durability, and a well-rounded game have served the Diaz brothers well up to this point. If Conor can't put Diaz away, I can see Diaz also taking a decision. So if you're leaning Nate Diaz, I think it could be done by any number of ways. It could be done by knockout, TKO at any round, submission at any point, or a decision. I'm leaning more towards a finish than a decision. And here's my prediction. These two are going to meet in the middle, and I think Conor will take a more reserved approach and pressure only when he feels he can enter the range. And I think Nate Diaz is going to be much quicker and much more willing to press forward than he was in the last fight. Conor will probably land leg kicks in the left hand, but I don't think he's going to pursue it as much as he did in the first. I do believe he'll try to bait Diaz to press forward, and Conor will look to counter much more often. Conor knows the counter right hand of Nate was a big factor in the first fight, so he's going to try and draw it out, I believe. It'll be interesting to see what approach he takes in this fight. I can still see Conor winning the first round, possibly the second too. If Nate stays durable though, he'll start picking it up as he establishes his own range. I think the third round will be pivotal probably for both guys. I see a changing of tides though, with Nate finding more success landing his shots. I do think the third round will be very close, and one will likely look to if it goes the distance. And I agree with John Kavanagh that this fight will likely end in the fourth. I generally don't pick fourth round finishes, if at all ever, but I kind of see it going that way for Nate Diaz. I think both guys are going to be bloody, but Nate will come alive landing at a higher frequency than Conor. And this is where I begin to question where the fight goes. I still have a strong belief Conor McGregor can win by stoppage, and I believe Nate Diaz can too. At the fourth round mark though, I have a tough time picking a stoppage. I can also kind of see it going to the judges, and I don't like Nate when he goes to the scorecards. We could end up seeing like a wrong end of a split decision for Nate, but I do believe it'll be stopped. I'm going to pick Nate Diaz to win, probably by fourth round stoppage, either by knockout or a submission, but I'm leaning more towards a submission. Thank you for watching Rapid MMA. Please be sure to subscribe for more UFC 202 breakdowns.